All right. Well, thank you for coming, everyone, tonight. My name is Ann Lewis. I'm actually now the executive director of the South Dakota Discovery Center, but I am still the 319 Information and Education Outreach coordinator. And as part of that, we at the South Dakota Discovery Center coordinate and work with the South Dakota Department of Ag and Natural Resources on a volunteer monitoring program. And so tonight is our onboarding where we learn what this program is, how to get involved, what it entails, and the value of it. So, with that, I'm going to pass the mic to Jordan from Danner, and she is going to tell us all about this.
Okay, so let me set up here. I'm Jordan Fosfett. I'm the volunteer coordinator at the Department of Agriculture and Natural Resources, or Danner, as I'll call it for the rest of this presentation. So I work in the Watershed Protection Program, and I'll just give you a little orientation about what this project is. So a little bit about the program, like Ann just mentioned, it's funded through kind of a roundabout way. So the under the Federal Clean Water Act, there's this Section 319 that gives grant funds to each state annually. So the Watershed Protection Program in Danner, we get those funds and we distribute them to individual projects across the state that have a goal to improve water quality. So one of those projects is called the Non-Point Source Information and Education Project, and that is run through the South Dakota Discovery Center. So that's how Ann is able to provide funding through that project to pay for all of the lab costs for all the water quality samples that volunteers collect. Um, and that allows us to use the same labs for volunteers that we use for all of our sampling at SD Danner. And there's a couple of reasons why that's really important and really cool. So that allows all of the data that volunteers collect to be pooled with all of the data collected through all of these other Danner projects. Um, and as you can see, they do collect a good chunk of our data. So there's different programs or projects that are run through the Watershed Protection Program, like statewide lakes and rotating basins, where we look at different lakes and streams across the state, different set of them every single field season. There's a couple small regional projects, other 319 projects. There's one in the Belle Fourche and one in the James River. They collect some samples too. And then the bulk of it comes from the statewide ambient stream monitoring program. And that's a network of 153 stream sites across the state that get monitored by Danner employees monthly or quarterly. So there's a lot of data that's being collected out there through all of these various projects. And all of it gets pooled in the same way, so it's all high quality, so it's all collected following standard operating procedures. So you would collect your samples in the same way that I would collect my samples when I go out in the field. And all of those field samplers, myself included, follow appropriate quality assurance project plans, or a QAP, that's what we call them. And the operating procedures we call an SOP. Um, This results in a lot of unbiased data with routine frequency. So we aim to collect about monthly. So routine ambient data is what we call that. It means that there's no targeting. So we can't target conditions such as rain or high flow events, drought events, and we don't look at businesses or facilities. That's a different side of the program that does the sampling for the permitted facilities. We're just trying to get all of the background data. So all of this gets used for assessment, but first it gets posted to WQMAP and HABSMAP. So it gets put into the state database and the EPA database. So even at a national level, people can go to the EPA website, and it's called the National Water Quality Monitoring Council, and they can download our data from the national database as well. But on the state side, our interactive maps are called WQMAP and the HABSMAP, and that's interactive maps where you can go and find all of your data results and all of the sample results for the water bodies we've monitored. Internally, we use this data for something called assessment. So that's reported on in the integrated report, which is a giant report that comes out every 2 years that has the 303D list and 305B report. These are two things that are also required under the Clean Water Act. And it just lists the status of water bodies in terms of if they're impaired or unimpaired. Impaired means that the water body doesn't meet its water quality standards. Unimpaired means that it is meeting its water quality standards. And I have more on standards in a couple slides here. Um, if a water body is impaired, it means that it gets pushed for TMDL development. So then we would use all of the water quality data to develop something called a total maximum daily load, or TMDL. And that's just a calculation where we look at how much of a pollutant that caused the impairment can persist in the water body and have it meet its water quality standards. So it's an equation to calculate how much we need to reduce the pollutant. So volunteers have a lot of different goals when they come to us. One of the main ones is just that they want to take a scientific look at water bodies close to home. So really focus on staying local to where all of the volunteers are located. Participating in citizen science. So the volunteer naturalists really involved in a lot of citizen science. So that's what they're here for. Some volunteers wanted to learn more about the state monitoring methods because they're kind of confusing, and the assessment methods. And then to meet minimum data requirements to determine impairment status. So like Ann mentioned, some of the streams that volunteers out in the hills sample had not been previously assessed in integrated reports, and now there's enough data on them that they can be assessed in these integrated reports coming out in the next few years. So the minimum data requirements, when we talk about that, we're referencing that to be assessed in the integrated report, lakes have to have 2 years of data over the last 10 years with at least 2 sampling events per year. And rivers and streams have to have 20 samples over the last 5 years. So when we set up our monitoring projects for watershed protection, we don't monitor every single water body in the state every single year. It would just be impossible. So any amount of data that the volunteers can contribute is always extra. More data is always better. So that's how we were able to meet a lot of the minimum data requirements, just by overlapping all these different projects to get as much data as possible. So some of the activities that volunteers get up to, they do lake sampling and stream and river sampling. Within the lakes, they sample at lake shorelines, so public swim beaches or boat ramps, and at the mid-lakes. Mid-lake stations do require some form of watercraft. So there's a excuse me, few different types of samples that volunteers can collect. And here's a little blurb about what that can tell you. We do a different presentation in the fall that goes into more detail on this if anyone is interested in that as well. So one of them is called the A bottle. So in that bottle, you can test for alkalinity, suspended solids, which is a measure of sediment in the water, dissolved solids, which is a measure of dissolved salts and minerals, and lab conductivity. And that's just a measure of how much electricity the water can conduct. And all of those are kind of tied together, so that's why they're all in the one bottle. The B bottle is a nutrient bottle, so you can look at different types of nitrogen. Those different types include ammonia, nitrate, total Kjeldahl nitrogen, which could be considered organic nitrogen, and total phosphorus. Those are things that would be commonly used in fertilizers, so they're the nutrients. C bottle is E. coli, so it's an indicator of fecal contamination. We look at that because it's a human health risk. It can cause acute gastrointestinal problems in high amounts. Microcystin is also something important to look at because it's a human health risk as well. So those big green mats that you might see on lakes in the summer have the potential to produce a toxin called microcystin. And it can cause skin irritation and rashes, and it can make people sick in really high amounts. And it can make dogs sick as well. So that's only on lakes. Another one that's only on lakes is the chlorophyll A bottle. Chlorophyll A is kind of also a measure of algal toxins because it's an estimate of how much algae is in a lake. So we kind of use those as a paired sample set. There's some field measurements too. Temperature is only on stream sampling, so there's these little thermometers that are like this big, you just stick in the surface. Secchi disk depth is a measure of water clarity, and that's on lake sampling. I have a picture of what that is in a few slides too. So, did we have something in the chat? Let me check. I'll also email out a PDF of the um, slides after the meeting too, so everyone can have a copy of these. So these are the standards that I was referencing. This is in the integrated report. It's a table of all the beneficial uses that can be assigned to a water body. So there's domestic water supply, different fish life, support status, recreation, irrigation, and stuff like that. And then each use has different parameters and standards assigned to each parameter. So you just think of these as the numbers that we use when we're looking at your results to see if it's impaired or unimpaired. And you don't have to know these numbers by any means, but it is a good frame of reference when you get your results to look back at this and kind of see what range those numbers are. So more about lake sampling activities. So lake shoreline, we focus on public access points, so boat ramps or swimming beaches, or anywhere where people might be in the water. If there's a popular swim area that's not a swimming beach, you can sample there. So we look at the E. coli and microcystin at those locations. If you happen to see a algal bloom that looks like this, we call that a harmful algal bloom or a HAB. If you see something that looks like this, just email us a picture or call that number and report it. And we like to know when those are happening because they change so rapidly. And we could be there one day and it would look completely normal, and the next day it could look like this. So just it's a good way to keep us informed. Mid-lake sampling is a way to characterize the whole lake. So you go out to the middle of the lake and collect your samples there. So you would need a boat. There's some volunteers that have used kayaks or canoes. So you can collect the A bottle, B bottle, chlorophyll A bottle, and the Secchi disk depth at the mid-lake station. And that round black and white disc is what a Secchi disc is. So you lower that into the water, and then once it disappears, you measure how much rope is out, and that's the Secchi disk depth, and you record that on your data sheet. So on streams, we also sample streams at public access points. So if there's recreation areas or under bridges, there's this thing called the right of way, where you can go under the bridge and sample. Or you can sample from the top of the bridge with something called a Van Doren, or a bottle on a stick. You can just stick it over the edge of the bridge and sample that way. And we'd provide those. If you are going to sample on bridges, we would ask that you wear safety vests, and I think that's something that we can provide as well. So at stream sites, you can sample the A bottle, B bottle, the C bottle, and temperature. So there's a lot of different documentation involved. So these first two things are kind of reference documents. So standard operating procedures, or SOP, is a document that outlines the procedures for all sampling activities conducted by volunteers. I'll give each of you a printed copy once we start your sampling plan, and I'll email you it too so you can print out as many as you want. It's also available on the volunteer webpage, so that way you could save a PDF to your phone. So if you're out sampling and you don't have cell service, you could always have something to reference if you have run into a question. There's also the Quality Assurance Project Plan, or QAP. That covers volunteer activities and activities that I have to complete and the lab has to complete for quality assurance. So before you can start sampling, you'd have to read through this document, and there's a page that you sign and I sign, and then I keep a copy of that on file just to keep a record that we're all on the same page, literally. So it just says that you're going to follow the SD Danner standard operating procedures for volunteer monitors and abide by the rules in the QAP. Some of those requirements are that you'll attend a virtual orientation, which is this today, so you've checked that box. attend an in-person field training. It's required for all first-year samplers, but we'd like to see as many people as we can come to those. You can come back as many times as you want. You'd have to follow your 2-year sampling plan, and I'll work with you to create that. And you'd have to complete quality assurance, quality control sampling. So that's extra sampling just to check these boxes. And then on my side, it says that I will help you develop a sampling plan and provide technical assistance. And I will go through your data and submit a quality assurance report every single year and then contact you if I see any issues with the data so that we can resolve them so we can keep using your data in the same way that we always do. And then it also says that the Health Lab, EnviroScience, and Mid-Continent will use EPA-approved lab methods. So the QA/QC sampling just means that 20% of your total number of samples that will be collected in your sampling plan have to be QA/QC sets. So that means 10% will be replicate samples. A replicate is just an identical bottle to your normal sample. So you'll just fill 2 bottles at the same time, and one will be the normal sample and one will be the replicate. So this tests the lab's precision because the results of 2 samples collected at the same time should be very similar. And if they're way off, then there's something wrong with the lab or something wrong with how they were collected. So we can fact check that with the results. Blank samples have to be the other 10%. So a blank sample is just a bottle that you rinse 3 times with distilled or deionized water and then fill and submit to the lab with the distilled water. And you can just buy that at a grocery store. This tests your technique to make sure that you're properly wearing gloves so you don't contaminate the sample and test how well you rinse the bottles because the lab shouldn't detect anything at all. And if they do, then we know that something along the way went wrong. So that's an example of what a blank replicate set looks like. So the bigger bottle in the back is the total suspended solids bottle. The little bottle in the front is E. coli. So there's 3 of each. So there's the regular sample, the replicate sample, and then the blank sample. And each of them gets labeled, and then the label gets marked replicate or blank, and then you leave it plain if it's the normal sample, and then each bottle gets its own data sheet. And the label is the sheet on top there, and then kind of on the side there in the binder is what the data sheet looks like. So the sampling plan is based on your personal interests. So what water bodies are you interested in sampling? What are you close to? Where are you interested in sampling? Is there an access point or public swim beach that you're especially interested in? And what do you want to learn about them? So if you want to test for E. coli or if you're more interested in the nutrients, we can set it up for either one of those or all of them. And when would you be able to sample? Most volunteers sample monthly, May or June through September, but it's up to you and what you're available for. So that 2-year sampling plan outlines your stations, which are the locations where you collect samples, the sampling frequency, what you will be testing for. It'll have the numbers and requirements for your quality control samples, and it'll also include the budget, which you don't have to worry about. The Discovery Center has to worry about that. So when we say stations, this is an example of what I mean. This is the Lake Poinsett plan. So they have a mid-lake station, and then there's 4 public swim beaches around Lake Poinsett, and they sample E. coli and microcystin at all of them. And the 3215, all lakes in South Dakota for our record keeping have a 4-digit code assigned to them, so that's the code for Lake Poinsett. This is another example of what the data sheets and labels look like. All of these will be provided to you. We mail them out to you before you start sampling. We recommend filling them out with fine point Sharpies because other non-waterproof pens or pencils will smudge or just wash off. So there's a few different labs that we use. The main one is the South Dakota Health Lab in Pierre. So this is the primary lab, and they can ship your bottles to you in a cooler so you're ready to sample. They have a form you can email to them or email to them, but I think the easiest way is to call that number at the bottom, 605-773-3368, and you can tell them how many bottles you need, what you're sampling for, and they'll send you a cooler each month with your bottles after you call. They also have a courier service for once you've collected your samples. So the day that you sample, before you go out, call the courier service in the morning and you can arrange a pickup, and they'll pick up your cooler and bring it to the health lab for you for free. They'll pick up anywhere in the state, and they also have a list on the side here of routine pickup locations and the time that they'll be leaving. So that's kind of the last call. Um, and then they automatically ship your cooler back to you with the same set of bottles after they get it at the health lab. So there's also Mid-Continent Labs. If you're in the Rapid City area, they did get bought. They're under new ownership. I think it's called Alliance Labs now. It was kind of a new development. So for the Rapid City people, if you're in the area, I'll contact you about that. So Black Hills area volunteers can pick up and drop off bottles in person. They're open Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. They do have an after hours drop box for coolers. Just make sure that there's enough ice in your cooler that they stay cold overnight, even if it's 90 degrees outside. Because they will do a temperature check in the morning to make sure that your samples are still 6 degrees Celsius. And that's another important thing to mention about E. coli is that from the time you collect the sample to when the lab gets it and it analyzes it, that all has to be done within 24 hours because it's a bacteria, it's a living thing. And after the 24 hours, too much of it will have died off to have a valid sample. So EnviroScience is the lab we use for microcystin analysis. They're in Stowe, Ohio. So at the beginning of the sampling season, I'll arrange to have your sampling kit sent to you. And that's just a cooler, like a smaller cooler with your little glass vials in it. And it comes with a pre-filled out, prepaid FedEx label. So you collect your samples, package them up in ice, tape your cooler shut, put the FedEx label on top, and call FedEx or drop it off at a FedEx location, and then it'll ship overnight to Ohio to get to EnviroScience. So all of this information is also available on the volunteer website, so it can link to our standard operating procedures, the CLAP. There's also YouTube videos that we've made. So if you have questions about how to collect a sample when you're about to go out and get your sampling done, you can watch those videos and review. There's also important dates that we try to keep posted on there, like the orientation dates and the training dates. And there's also a really cool story map you can scroll through that has pictures. There's also more information on different citizen science projects through the Discovery Center if you're interested in participating in MacroBlitz, which is the bug project, or anything else. There's a list there that you can look at. There's the Water Quality Monitoring Access Portal, or WQ Map, that I talked about earlier. So this is a map where all those yellow dots are monitoring stations, and you can click on them and see sample results. All of our algal bloom data, so algal toxin results and microcystin results collected by volunteers and through other state projects, those are on this harmful algal blooms map. And just to recap, before you start sampling, here's everything that you'd need to do. So you'll have to attend a volunteer training. We have one planned for May 9th in Pierre, South Dakota at Lily Park for a group in Pierre, but anyone else can join that. We've also hosted individual regional trainings. If you can't make it to that, reach out and I can come to you. Or if you want to come vacation to Rapid City, you can do that too. So you'd have to read and sign the volunteer CLAP and submit that back to me. You can take a picture and send it to me. That works too. We'll create a sampling plan with your stations, what you're sampling for, the frequency. I'll send you all of your data sheets and labels for you to get out there and get sampling. And then before you start sampling, once you have all of your supplies, get your bottles from the health lab or from Mid-Continent. and then figure out how you're going to get them back to the lab. So figure out the courier service, if you're going to deliver them in person, if you're in the Black Hills, or if you're going to have to ship them through FedEx. Uh, and then here's my contact information. If you have any questions at any time, you can email me or call me. And I think there was a few questions in the chat. But Anne, do we want
Uh,
to video
yeah,
those or?
I've been monitoring the chat. And so you mentioned people wanting to know, can we get these slides? And you're going to send them out via PDF. When you registered for the Zoom, we were able to get your emails. So we will use that email you used to register for the Zoom, unless you want us to use something different. So Rebecca sharing her experience about um, cold packs. Also, pack a cooler with snow. I don't think I will ever monitor in the winter, but you do you. That sounds really cold. Um, and just that we do a deeper dive into the data in our November meeting. We have a meeting at the end of the year, where at the end of the monitoring season, and we kind of look at some of the trends and some of our activity. So, yeah, this is great. I'm going to pause the recording and for